What seemed like an ordinary morning quickly became the beginning of a chilling truth as I realized that sometimes the greatest danger doesn't come from strangers, but from your own family. My name is Melody. I'm 28 years old. After my parents passed away, I took the precaution of placing their multi-million-dollar inheritance into a trust, thinking it was simply a smart move for the future. But at exactly 6 a.m. that morning, just as I was about to leave for work, my phone rang. It was my sister. Her voice was unusually cold, no greeting, just a rushed warning that I must not come home that day under any circumstances. Her excuse sounded reasonable at first, but the more I thought about it, the more uneasy I became. And by the time night fell, all the pieces finally came together, and I realized that her warning wasn't meant to protect me. It was to hide a plan she had secretly set in motion to take everything from me. If you've ever found yourself questioning your own family or have a perspective on this kind of situation, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments so we can discuss it together. The expansive property in Carmel suddenly felt incredibly hollow, with a complete silence after the devastating day my parents lost their lives in a tragic car crash. The vibrant energy that once filled the spacious rooms was instantly replaced by a suffocating stillness, making every single footstep echo throughout the hallways. I found myself completely alone navigating the overwhelming maze of complex funeral arrangements, while simultaneously trying to process the sheer magnitude of this sudden grief. My best friend Sarah provided some incredibly vital emotional support during those first few agonizing days before she inevitably had to return to her own family in another city. Once her car pulled out of the driveway, I realized the profound weight of finalizing death certificates or organizing the extensive memorial service had fallen entirely on my shoulders. I spent countless hours sitting at the kitchen table sorting through endless piles of necessary paperwork without receiving any meaningful assistance from my only sibling. My sister Justine had established her own life in a distant state many years ago, while actively choosing to remain completely disconnected from our daily family dynamic. She rarely bothered to initiate contact or schedule any physical visits during the prosperous years when Mom and Dad were still alive. Her occasional holiday phone calls always felt like a mandatory chore rather than a genuine attempt to maintain a meaningful biological bond with us. She would usually offer a few generic updates about her career before rushing off the phone with some transparent excuse about being too busy. I had long ago accepted the harsh reality that my sister simply had no desire to participate in our family life unless it directly benefited her immediate circumstances. That prolonged pattern of absolute emotional indifference miraculously vanished the moment the final burial services concluded, alongside the permanent reality of the estate settling in. Justine suddenly transformed into an entirely different person by booking expensive flights back to Indiana on a surprisingly regular basis. She confidently claimed these frequent visits were strictly designed to comfort me during my darkest hours of mourning. She arrived with heavy suitcases while immediately unpacking them into the guest bedroom, as if she was preparing for an extended residency. I initially wanted to believe her sudden physical presence really stemmed from a shared sense of profound loss regarding the tragic passing of our parents. However, the daily atmosphere inside the house quickly revealed a deeply uncomfortable reality hidden beneath her overly affectionate facade. We were living together under the exact same roof, yet every single conversation we shared felt remarkably forced, alongside being heavily calculated strictly on her end. I was still actively drowning in immense grief, while she constantly attempted to seamlessly steer our casual discussions toward the overall financial value of the property. I felt a constant sense of exhaustion just trying to navigate her endless inquiries regarding the total square footage of the estate. She would casually bring up property taxes or ask highly detailed questions about the general upkeep of the grounds while I was simply trying to force down a piece of toast for breakfast. Her spoken words entirely lacked any authentic warmth or genuine concern for my deteriorating mental state. She never once asked how I was sleeping or if I needed help managing the overwhelming trauma. The lingering discomfort quickly escalated into genuine suspicion when I started observing her bizarre physical behavior around the property during the late evening hours. Justine developed a strange habit of aimlessly wandering through the different hallways while carefully examining the structural details of the expensive house. I actually caught her pacing across the living room to measure the floor dimensions with her footsteps before she quickly pretended to be casually admiring a framed photograph. Her persistent wandering inevitably focused on the old home office, where Mom and Dad used to manage their personal business affairs. I would frequently find her standing completely still in that specific room while intensely staring at the heavy steel safe concealed beneath the large mahogany desk. Her eyes would trace the intricate outline of the security dial as if she was mentally trying to crack the code. She never explicitly asked me for the combination, but her constant lingering presence around that particular corner of the house communicated a very clear message. The carefully constructed grieving daughter routine was slowly slipping away to reveal a highly focused individual obsessively evaluating the physical assets. 3 weeks after the funeral concluded, Justine's daily actions began crossing the strict boundary of normal concern between blood relatives. She started developing a highly suspicious routine of staying awake long past midnight while actively claiming she needed extra time to organize our family keepsakes. The quiet hours of the night provided her with the perfect cover to secretly search the expansive house without drawing any immediate attention to her physical movements. I quickly realized her sudden passion for sentimental items was actually a calculated excuse to systematically rummage through the wooden desk drawers. Those specific compartments contained the highly important financial records my parents had meticulously maintained throughout their entire marriage. She was completely ignoring the photo albums while directly targeting the thick folders filled with various property documents. The undeniable proof of her hidden agenda presented itself when I quietly walked into the dimly lit home office to grab a misplaced phone charger. I caught Justine sitting directly on the floor while desperately trying to read through a large stack of Dad's old bank statements under the desk lamp. She physically flinched when the wooden door creaked open before hastily attempting to shove the financial papers back into the manila folder. "What are you looking for in Dad's personal files?" I asked while standing firmly in the doorway watching her scramble across the carpeted floor. "I am just gathering the old invoices to help you sort them out more easily," she answered with a remarkably unconvincing smile plastered across her face. Her terrible attempt at feigning innocence pushed my internal suspicion to its absolute peak right at that exact moment. I chose not to argue with her blatant lie, because confronting her directly would only make her conceal her future actions more carefully. The very next morning, following that disturbing office encounter, I took immediate action to secure the vulnerable estate from any further domestic espionage. I drove straight to my workplace parking lot before making a highly confidential phone call from the absolute privacy of my locked vehicle. I reached out directly to my family attorney Russell to urgently request a secret meeting regarding the immediate protection of the financial assets. Introducing Russell into the equation felt like the only logical step to prevent Justine from crossing any further legal boundaries within the household. He had managed my parents' legal affairs for decades, so he fully understood the massive scale of the property currently sitting at risk. Sitting across from his large mahogany desk later that afternoon, I clearly explained my absolute desire to immediately place the entire inheritance into a living trust. I detailed the highly concerning behavior Justine had been exhibiting regarding the financial documents stored securely inside the Carmel property. I instructed him to establish an impenetrable legal barrier capable of ensuring absolute safety from any outside interference or unauthorized asset liquidation. Russell immediately agreed to proceed with the necessary legal procedures right away, without asking any unnecessary probing questions about my sister. He efficiently pulled up the existing estate files to begin formalizing the living trust exactly according to the specific wishes Mom and Dad had carefully outlined before passing. I signed the preliminary authorization forms right then to initiate the rapid transfer of the real estate properties away from my vulnerable personal name into a highly protected legal entity. Securing this definitive legal framework provided me with a crucial layer of defense against whatever financial scheme my sister was actively planning to execute behind my back. The entire process at the law firm took less than 2 hours, but it fundamentally shifted the balance of power entirely in my favor. I left his office feeling significantly more prepared to face the escalating tensions waiting for me back at the house. 1 week later, the atmosphere inside the house became incredibly tense, as Justine's patience seemed to have completely evaporated. She entirely abandoned her comforting sister routine to directly demand physical possession of the original property deed. She cornered me in the kitchen while loudly claiming I was far too emotionally compromised to effectively manage the complex estate taxes. She insisted her taking control of the legal documents was absolutely necessary to protect the property from severe government penalties. She argued that my current mental state made me a massive liability regarding the timely filing of important financial paperwork. She attempted to intimidate me by slamming her hand against the marble countertop to emphasize her fake authority over the situation. I took a deep breath to maintain my composure before firmly refusing to surrender any sensitive financial information to her. I maintained steady eye contact to demonstrate my complete refusal to submit to her aggressive manipulation tactics. "Hand over the property deed so I can safely manage the estate taxes for you," she demanded while blocking my path to the hallway. "The attorney is already holding and processing all the paperwork, so you do not need to worry about it," I replied with a completely steady voice. Her facial expression instantly hardened upon hearing that the legal professionals were already involved in the estate management. She quickly turned away without uttering another word before retreating upstairs to her designated guest bedroom. The absolute truth regarding her aggressive behavior finally revealed itself later that afternoon while I was cleaning the living room. I was physically moving the heavy seating arrangements to vacuum the carpets when I accidentally discovered a folded piece of paper. Someone had hastily stuffed the official document deep beneath the thick fabric cushions of the main sofa. I pulled out the hidden paper to find a massively overdue commercial loan notice explicitly addressed to Justine at her out-of-state residence. The aggressive banking letter clearly indicated a severe default status involving a substantial amount of borrowed money tied directly to her failing business operations. The financial institution was threatening immediate legal action to recover the massive business loan she had personally guaranteed. Staring at the terrifying financial figures printed on the official bank letterhead instantly helped me connect all the missing pieces together. The overwhelming debt notice completely exposed the sinister motive driving her suspiciously frequent flights back to Indiana following the tragic accident. She was never visiting Carmel to provide emotional support during my mourning period under any circumstances whatsoever. Justine was desperately attempting to misappropriate the multi-million-dollar inheritance to escape her own catastrophic financial ruin before her creditors seized her remaining assets. She viewed the family home purely as a convenient financial asset she could liquidate to erase her massive commercial debt. Her previous attempts to search the office drawers now made perfect sense, considering her desperate need to locate the property deed. That terrifying realization pushed me to finalize my defensive strategy without wasting another single second of precious time. I retreated to my locked bedroom that exact same night to decisively access the highly secure legal portal Russell had established for me. I carefully reviewed every single page of the digital documents illuminating my computer screen to ensure absolute accuracy regarding the property transfer. The legal files clearly outline the permanent transfer of the Carmel house into the impenetrable legal structure of the living trust. I methodically applied my certified electronic signatures to the finalized files to officially activate the binding legal power of the protective trust. Completing that final digital step successfully locked the entire estate away from anyone attempting to execute an unauthorized property transfer. I closed the laptop knowing my decisive action had successfully secured my financial future against her impending attacks. 3 days later, the absolute silence enveloping the entire house brought an ominous premonition regarding a massive storm about to strike. Justine abruptly shifted her entire demeanor by completely dropping her previous irritability to actively play the role of an incredibly caring sister. She spent the entire afternoon inside the kitchen personally preparing a surprisingly lavish dinner for the two of us to share. Her sudden domestic enthusiasm felt incredibly jarring after the aggressive confrontation we previously had regarding the legal property documents. She cheerfully set the dining table with the expensive silverware while constantly offering me extra portions of the roasted chicken she had baked. The forced pleasantries creating this fake domestic harmony only elevated my internal anxiety, rather than providing any genuine comfort. During the course of the heavy meal, she continuously pressed me for highly specific details regarding my upcoming work schedule for the following day. She repeatedly attempted to confirm the exact moment I planned to drive away from the property alongside my anticipated arrival time back home. She carefully framed her constant questions under the deceptive guise of wanting to ensure my personal comfort, while the supposed maintenance workers occupied the property. "What time is your shift tomorrow? Because I am planning to call some workers to check all the plumbing in the house," she casually asked while pouring herself another glass of water. "I have a very long meeting at the company, so I probably will not be able to get home until after 8 o'clock at night." I deliberately replied while keeping my facial expression completely neutral. I successfully pretended to remain completely oblivious to her underlying malicious intentions by confidently feeding her that entirely fabricated daily schedule. Providing her with a false timeline indicating a late evening return gave her the exact false confidence she desperately needed to execute her secret plan. She visibly relaxed her shoulders upon hearing my delayed arrival time, while quickly changing the conversation topic to something completely irrelevant. I carefully monitored her subtle physical reactions from across the wooden table while internally preparing myself for whatever financial ambush she was currently orchestrating. The unsettling atmosphere continued deep into the night, while I lay tossing and turning underneath my heavy bedroom blankets. Around midnight, I heard the distinct sound of the wooden floorboards creaking outside my door, followed by Justine whispering frantically into her mobile phone. I quietly slipped out of my bed to carefully press my ear against the cold bedroom door to eavesdrop on her late-night conversation. I clearly heard her explicitly mentioning the need to withdraw a large amount of physical cash to pay a team of professional movers arriving early tomorrow morning. She specifically instructed the person on the phone to arrive with heavy-duty equipment capable of transporting large metal objects without causing any structural damage to the surrounding walls. Her hushed voice carried a heavy sense of desperate urgency as she confirmed the specific residential address of our Carmel property to the unknown caller. I slowly stepped back from the doorframe to avoid making any sudden noises that might alert her to my hidden presence. Returning to my bed, I carefully turned the metal lock on my bedroom door to ensure my physical safety throughout the remainder of the dark night. I remained completely wide awake, staring directly at the ceiling while meticulously strategizing my upcoming defensive actions. I spent those agonizing hours mentally preparing myself to face the absolute worst-case scenarios, inevitably unfolding the moment the sun finally decided to rise. The digital clock on my nightstand slowly ticked away the remaining hours, while I gathered the emotional strength required to permanently confront my own flesh and blood. I refused to let her blatant greed successfully dismantle the secure future my parents had worked their entire lives to diligently build for our family. The very next morning, right after I had just driven my vehicle a short distance away from the property, my mobile phone suddenly began ringing continuously. I glanced down at the glowing screen to see Justine calling me right on schedule, just like I had anticipated the previous night. I answered the incoming call while keeping my eyes firmly focused on the empty residential street stretching out ahead of my windshield. She did not bother offering any standard morning greetings before immediately launching into her carefully rehearsed fabrication regarding a massive plumbing disaster. She claimed a catastrophic failure in the plumbing system required immediate professional intervention to prevent severe structural damage to the entire foundation. Melody, do not come home today under any circumstances because the main water pipe completely burst and the maintenance workers are aggressively tearing apart the floors, which makes the entire property incredibly dangerous. She ordered with a remarkably fake sense of panic. I agreed to her ridiculous demands while mentally confirming my worst suspicions before ending the call with a perfectly calm demeanor. The digital clock on my dashboard had barely advanced a single minute when my phone immediately started vibrating against the passenger seat once again. I pressed the flashing green button, expecting Justine to add another fabricated detail to her elaborate plumbing emergency story. However, the voice coming through the speakers belonged to Russell, carrying a deeply concerning tone of absolute professional urgency. He bypassed all pleasantries to deliver a terrifying piece of information regarding the immediate safety of the family estate. Melody, you need to come directly to my law office right this second because someone is actively taking the necessary legal steps to transfer the ownership of your property, he stated with absolute authority. Hearing those terrifying words prompted me to instantly perform an aggressive turning maneuver across the empty asphalt road to head straight toward the downtown legal district. I arrived at his professional building within 20 minutes, before rushing through the glass doors to reach his private office on the second floor. Russell was already sitting behind his desk with his computer monitor turned outward to display the official county record system. He directly pointed at the glowing screen to show me the undeniable digital footprint of an unauthorized individual attempting to access the property deed. The system logs clearly indicated multiple suspicious inquiries originating from the exact internet address registered to my house in Carmel. Russell then handed me a freshly printed document confirming a scheduled appointment for a mobile notary public to arrive at my residence that very morning. The booking confirmation explicitly listed my legal name as the primary client requiring an urgent signature for a rapid real estate transfer. The incredibly detailed paperwork proved Justine was actively executing a highly coordinated financial crime right under the roof my parents had built. She had meticulously arranged for a fraudulent official to validate the forged property transfer while she assumed I was sitting inside a corporate meeting. Realizing her malicious plan to liquidate the assets was happening at that exact moment left absolutely no room for any further discussion. I did not utter a single word to Russell as I immediately snatched the printed evidence from his hands to sprint back toward the parking lot. I threw myself into the driver's seat before slamming my foot aggressively against the gas pedal to accelerate the vehicle toward my neighborhood. The engine roared loudly as I broke multiple speed limits while navigating the familiar suburban streets to confront my sister directly. I gripped the leather steering wheel with white knuckles while preparing to permanently shut down her disgusting attempt to steal my inheritance. Exactly 15 minutes later, my vehicle screeched to a halt right in front of the main entrance of our family residence in Carmel. The violent sound of the tires against the pavement echoed through the quiet neighborhood while I stared at the chaotic scene unfolding on my front lawn. I immediately witnessed the sight of a massive professional moving truck parked directly across the driveway with several strange workers bustling around the open cargo area. They were currently using heavy-duty moving equipment to slowly drag my parents' massive steel safe across the polished hardwood floors of the main hallway. The locksmith was already kneeling beside the security dial with a set of specialized tools, while Justine stood over him with an expression of intense focus. I shoved the front door open with enough force to hit the interior wall before stepping directly into the center of the foyer to interrupt her frantic directions. My sudden and unannounced presence clearly caught Justine off guard as she physically stumbled backward, while her face turned a ghostly shade of white. Justine regained her composure with a remarkable speed by reaching into her leather handbag to retrieve a crisp set of legal documents. She aggressively stepped toward me while holding out a pen with a trembling hand, as if she could physically force me to agree to her demands. She insisted that signing the forged power of attorney was the only possible way to liquidate the property before her creditors destroyed our family reputation. Sign this power of attorney quickly because I am trying my absolute best to save this entire family from financial ruin, Justine shouted with a voice that was beginning to crack under the immense pressure. I looked directly at the falsified documents before coldly pushing her hand away from my face with a gesture of absolute disgust. I stood my ground in the middle of the hallway to ensure that every single worker present could hear my direct declaration regarding the legal status of the estate. I announced that the entire property, along with every single cent of the remaining inheritance, had already been placed under the permanent management of a living trust. The assets are already safely tucked away within the living trust, so the paper in your hand is currently nothing more than a useless pile of scrap paper, I stated with a tone of icy finality that silenced the entire room. I pulled my mobile phone from my pocket and activated the speakerphone function so Russell's authoritative voice could fill the high-ceiling foyer. He spoke with the absolute weight of the law while reciting the specific legal penalties associated with home invasion and the fraudulent misappropriation of estate assets. Russell warned the moving crew that the local police department was already being dispatched to the residential address to handle the reported trespassing. The hired workers exchanged worried glances before immediately abandoning their heavy equipment to sprint back toward the safety of their parked truck. They drove away from the curb with such haste that they nearly clipped a nearby mailbox while leaving the front door wide open. Justine stood frozen in the middle of the empty hallway, while her desperate plan to steal my future dissolved into a pile of worthless forged paperwork. I simply pointed my finger toward the open front door to signal that her time inside our family home had officially come to a permanent end. I refused to offer her a single word of comfort as she gathered her belongings to walk out of my life forever without a single glance backward. 6 months have passed since that chaotic morning, and all disputes have been settled through incredibly fair and ruthless legal judgments. Justine refused to accept her initial defeat quietly while deciding to file a formal lawsuit in the local county court to challenge the entire inheritance distribution. She shamelessly accused me of exploiting our parents during a supposed period of mental instability to manipulate the legal property documents in my favor. Her legal team attempted to portray me as a calculating individual who isolated mom and dad from their eldest daughter to seize control of the multi-million-dollar estate. I sat across the courtroom watching her perform a fake display of grief while her attorney presented a series of baseless allegations regarding the validity of the living trust. During the extremely tense preliminary hearing, Russell stood up with absolute composure to present the meticulously organized records of the protective trust. He systematically demonstrated that the legal entity had been established according to the long-standing instructions my parents provided years before their passing. Russell then delivered a devastating piece of evidence by submitting the verified records of Justine's massive commercial debt that she had desperately tried to conceal from the court. He successfully argued that her financial desperation provided a clear motive for her fraudulent attempt to misappropriate the property deed through a mobile notary. The judge carefully reviewed the undeniable digital evidence before slamming the wooden gavel down to officially dismiss Justine's entire lawsuit with prejudice. The court issued a stern warning to her regarding the severe legal consequences of intentional document forgery and attempting to mislead the judicial system. Losing her final desperate legal lifeline caused Justine's entire house of cards to collapse immediately under the weight of her numerous creditors. She was instantly hit with multiple lawsuits from the financial institutions in her home state seeking to recover the defaulted business loans she had personally guaranteed. Justine was ultimately forced to file for Chapter 7 bankruptcy while losing her residential property and her failing art gallery business in a matter of weeks. She found herself completely destitute after her aggressive attempts to steal my inheritance resulted in her permanent financial ruin. I remained completely steadfast in my decision to ignore every single desperate letter or frantic voicemail she sent, begging for some financial mercy. I finalized the complex legal procedures to sell the family residence in Carmel before packing my personal belongings to leave those painful memories behind forever. I successfully transferred my remaining assets to a different financial institution while moving to a quiet coastal city where no one knew the details of my family trauma. My new life provides a sense of profound peace that I never thought possible during the agonizing months spent fighting against my own sister's greed. Before we conclude today's intense journey, let us take a moment to reflect on the powerful lessons hidden within Melody's difficult experience. This story serves as a stark reminder that even the closest family bonds can sometimes be destroyed by the corrosive influence of extreme financial greed. The channel owner believes that protecting yourself with proper legal documentation, like a living trust, is an essential act of self-defense rather than a sign of mistrust. Do not wait until a crisis occurs to secure your future, because those you trust most might be the ones hiding the darkest intentions during your most vulnerable moments. Now, the channel owner wants to ask each of you a very important question regarding these complicated dynamics. Would you have the same courage to permanently cut off a sibling if they tried to steal your entire inheritance like Justine did? Please share your honest opinions in the comments below, because your perspective could help someone else navigating a similar family nightmare. Thank you for staying until the very end to support this story.
Thank you. See you again.